All right, welcome aboard to the lecture on Thomas Jefferson. Here what we're going to be doing is discussing the arrival of principles and contributions of Jeffersonian democracy and the conditions as stated by Jefferson necessary to preserve such a democracy. All right, so first off we want to discuss the election of 1800 and the arrival of Jeffersonian democracy. So the split in the Federalist Party during Adams' administration made Thomas Jefferson. We're going to go more into this in a later lecture when we get to the two-party system. But suffice to say, made between the Thomas Jefferson and the Republican Party's prospect of winning the presidency in the election of 1800 very good. The Republican caucus named Thomas Jefferson as their presidential candidate and Aaron Burr for vice president, while the Federalists supported John Adams for president and C.C. Pinckney for vice president. The final vote was 64 for Pinckney, 65 for Adams, and 73 for Jefferson and Burr. Because of the unexpected deadlock between Jefferson and Burr, the House of Representatives would have to decide the election. According to the Constitution, voting was to be done by states, one vote each, not by the individuals. Thus, 9 of the 16 states were needed to win. The House of Representatives was controlled for several more months by the lame duck Federalists, who were eager to elect Burr because he was from New York. They felt that he would represent their interests more than Jefferson. Also, Burr would not step down, as he was hoping to pick up the presidency basically through the back door. Finally, on the 36th ballot, Jefferson captured the presidency due to the failure of the Federalists to make the Republicans accept Burr. The election of 1800 is significant in American history basically for 3 reasons. First, the possibility of another such tie was removed by the 12th Amendment to the Constitution in 1804, which required the electors from the Electoral College to vote on separate ballots for president and vice president. Jefferson later claimed the election of 1800 was a revolution comparable to that of 1776, but it was no revolution in the sense of a massive popular upheaval or an upending of the political system. What was revolutionary was the peaceful and orderly transfer of power on the basis of an election whose results all parties accepted. This is considered a remarkable achievement by any country in this time in history, as comparable developments would not take place in Britain for another generation. The most important results of the election of 1800 and the Jeffersonian Revolution was only in a change in the government's attitudes towards the people. The Federalists openly advocated government by the rich, for the rich. Chief Justice John Jay said it best: "Those who own the country ought to govern it. Let the rich rule," insisted many Federalist leaders, for they had the leisure with which to study the problems of governing. They also enjoyed all the advantages of background that offered them education and the culture of leadership. The Republicans, on the other hand, advocated government for the rich, for the interests of the common person. However, Jefferson did not advocate giving every adult white male the vote. He favored government only for those men who were literate enough to make informed decisions for themselves and for the problems of society. But he had profound faith in the reasonableness and teachableness of the masses of people and their collective wisdom if education was made available. So because of his republicanizing ideas for the common person could identify with Jefferson and the new government more than his predecessor, Jefferson's presidency, especially his skillful guidance of Congress, demonstrates his brilliance performance as a leader. And by the way, when I'm using the term republicanism, it's not in relation to the modern Republican Party. He was a Republican Democrat, which was not, it doesn't reflect any of the two parties that exist today. Republicanism is basically the idea that you elect your leaders, and they, in office, exercise your interests. So, getting to his leadership, it can be seen by his attempts to cultivate programs in the public interest that truly transcended party lines and helped build a national identity, basically. Also, in foreign affairs, when he was forced to deal with challenges from foreign countries, Jefferson proved to be a strong nationalist. Thus, the importance of Jefferson was his ability to adjust his strong sectional and personal philosophy for the good of the nation. So it's important to keep in mind he was, going into the presidency, he was a strict constitutionalist. If it wasn't in the Constitution, then the federal government has no business doing any of that, right? But he's going to change his tune. He's going to become a loose interpreter of the Constitution. So he reflects something that's kind of essential to the American character, this sense of pragmatism to his leadership. He was willing to change when he saw it was, as he perceived it, in the best interests of the country. The secret of Jefferson's success with the common person was that he appealed to and expressed America's better self. Its idealism, its simplicity, and hopeful outlook, its optimism, rather than the material and imperial ambitions which Hamilton represented. So looking at probably one of the most famous things that Jefferson did during his presidency, the Louisiana Purchase, we want to discuss Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase and show how there was very little change from that of his Federalist predecessors, the political party before him under George Washington and John Adams, led by basically Hamilton in his domestic and foreign policies and interpretation of the Constitution. So in October of 1800, Napoleon from France secured from Spain in a secret treaty the territory of Louisiana. Rumors of that transfer were partially confirmed in October of 1802 when Spanish, who had controlled the territory for the French, canceled the right of deposit given the United States under the Pinckney Treaty in 1795. So with the right of deposit lost, this meant that most of the American trade of the Mississippi and Ohio valleys would be tied up at New Orleans. Consequently, the American farmers would be unable to get their produce to market. So faced with this, there was a roar of anger basically rolling up and down the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, as many Westerners talked of either descending upon New Orleans with rifles in hand, or of following Spanish leadership in Jefferson and the United States government failed to protect their commercial rights. So to avoid conflict with the French and Spanish, and to keep the support of Westerners, Jefferson instructed Robert Livingston, the United States minister in Paris, to purchase the port of New Orleans for $2 million. In January of 1803, Jefferson asked James Monroe to join Livingston in Paris and offer up to $10 million for New Orleans and the Floridas. By the time Monroe joined Livingston, Napoleon had lost interest in establishing an American empire and offered to sell the entire Louisiana territory for $15 million. So on April 30th, 1803, the deal was closed, and the agreement provided that $4 million of the $15 million would be used to settle past claims by American ship owners against France. So the significance of this purchase wasn't that just that the United States got all of this land for pennies on the dollar. But the Constitution said nothing about the purchase of territory by the federal government. And as Jefferson felt an amendment would take too long, the territory was purchased by way of treaty. So it demonstrates Jefferson's pragmatism. It demonstrates his stance on the Constitution, going from this strict constitutionalist to this loose constitutionalist, and it definitely demonstrates the power, the reach of the federal government over the state governments. This is going to allow people in the states, the state governments, to become even more subordinate to the federal government when it's understood what this new entity called the federal government is able to do. It's able to negotiate for the interest of all of the states, acquiring such amounts of such territory. Louisiana Purchase. Anyway, that concludes this learning objective under Jefferson. I'll see you in the next one. Let me know if you have any questions. Talk to you later.